Hola, digital world. Welcome back once again to another Spliced In Later. I hope you are all doing better out there than I am. I've had myself a crazy week, and it's only Tuesday. But the bright spot of the week is that I'm putting aside time to record another cheeky little podcast episode and upload it to you guys as traditional. Now, today we're going to be doing something a little different. And when I say a little different, I mean we're going to be doing something exactly the same. We're going to be retreading the same area that I've trod in many times since starting up this podcast. But because I want to do that, it's nice and safe, and I'm pretty sure it's good content. So here we go. Because around February, I started up another series where I would check in on a certain thing every now and then and try and leave a big enough gap in between so that it was not a frequent thing where that was the only thing I was talking about, but not far enough that people would forget I was talking about it. And one of those that we're doing is we are going through the MCU, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, possibly my absolute favorite movie franchise of all time. Because, oh boy, do I love the superhero stuff, do I love Marvel, and do I love the connected, weaving universe that this franchise has become through multiple different franchises: Iron Man, Captain America, Thor, Guardians of the Galaxy, all of them. The way they have somehow managed to establish this status where they can weave in and out of each other's worlds seamlessly without it being jarring or disturbing before they can all come together for their big team-up movies. As I record this to you now, things have certainly changed across the MCU front. When I started this, we were really only talking about movies. TV series did exist, but they weren't really connected. But as of now, WandaVision has completely finished, and The Falcon and the Winter Soldier is more than halfway through on Disney+. And this is taking movie characters and giving them their own stories and episodes, which supposedly will have an effect on movies in the future, and movies will have an effect on these TV shows in the future. So it's definitely getting bigger. It's getting a huger, grander scale. May it get too much for them? I'm not sure. As of now, I think it's doing okay. I think they've struck a gold. They've struck a rhythm. They've struck a routine. But they know how to do it. With Kevin Feige at the helm, I don't know. At the moment, they can do no wrong. I'm sure they will one day, but as of right now, good stuff. We started off this chat, of course, with Iron Man. I discussed the original MCU film. Iron Man came out when there was no MCU. If it wasn't for Tony Stark, if it wasn't for Robert Downey Jr. and Nick Fury and all the little seeds and stuff in that movie, we would not have the MCU. But I focused more on how Iron Man as itself was just a good movie with hints at what could be, but not necessarily would be. And then to shake things up, I reviewed the most recent entry into the MCU, WandaVision, because that finished up. So that's sort of the thing that's going to be happening. I'm going to be going chronologically, so we'll be going from the very early stuff forward. But when a Disney Plus film finishes, or if Black Widow ever one day finally comes out, then that will, of course, be shunted to the front of the queue because it's recent. So people actually care about it, rather than me talking about a movie that came out going on 14 years ago now. No, Jesus Christ, no, hasn't been that long. Probably more like 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 years. I wasn't far off. If you are familiar with me in real life, numbers and me don't get along, but we're going to breeze past that. Anyway, so today what we're talking about is sort of the opposite of what I've been talking about how MCU has established itself as this big interconnected weaving world where all movies are important and reflects what happens in later films, and everything that happens has been referenced again, and characters are never just left in the dust. They always come and go, because we are talking about what many people consider to effectively be the black sheep of the MCU franchise, which is the 2008 film The Incredible Hulk, starring Edward Norton. Now, I'm going to get this right off the bat in the beginning. This isn't going to be your standard view of The Incredible Hulk, where most people seem to shit on it and cast it aside and say, oh yeah, it's got nothing compared to the other MCU films. I'm going to say right now that I am a firm supporter of The Incredible Hulk. I don't think it's one of the best MCU films of all time. It certainly wouldn't crack my top 10. But it's not on the bottom by far. It's absolutely not the worst thing that has come out of the MCU. It's completely middle tier. It is a fine, simple superhero movie with the Hulk as a main character. The Hulk has notoriously been a very hard character to put into its own film. You either really love the Ang Lee Hulk starring Eric Bana, or you really hate it. I've never met anybody who's just like, it's fine. So for this one, furthermore, coming in at a point where it was not created to be a part of the MCU, it was created side by side of Iron Man. It's just a separate property, because back in the 2000s, Marvel films were just coming out left, right, and center. All the different properties had bought all the different rights to different characters. No one cared what anyone else was doing. Incredible Hulk and Iron Man came out at a point where we had already had 3 Spider-Man films, 3 X-Men films, 2 Fantastic Four films, 3 Blade films, a couple Punisher films, crazy stuff, and none of it was connected in any way. I believe it was only at the very last minute where the Incredible Hulk was looked at in terms of its plot and what was happening in it, and thought, if we just throw in this one little scene, then everything else that happens in it, we can allude to future possibilities. But in the same way of Iron Man, it's more just a, isn't this neat? Maybe one day. It's a grand concept, but possibly not. A lot of the slack that the Incredible Hulk gets, I believe, is because of that, because it was not originally to be part of the MCU, and moving forward from here, it has never really been truly important to the mythology and the franchise of the MCU, not notoriously because Bruce Banner in here is played by Edward Norton, and then from the Avengers onward, he was played by Mark Ruffalo. Adding on that, you've got a story which has never been referenced in future MCU films, storylines and threads that had never been picked up in future films in terms of what happened to the Abomination, the fate of Samuel Stearns, whatever happened to Bruce's one love, Betty, considering he's already been fooling around with Black Widow and other movies. And characters that have been pulled from here have been drastically changed from what they originally were. Mark Ruffalo's portrayal of Bruce Banner, for better or worse, completely different to Edward Norton's. I love Mark Ruffalo's Bruce Banner. I also have an appreciation for the way Edward Norton plays Bruce Banner here. But the two of them, their personalities, the way they engage with other characters, and the way they portray the character of Bruce and the Hulk, starkly distant. Edward Norton portrays him as this tragic, scrawny, depressed person who's struggling with such a terrible infliction upon him, whereas Mark Ruffalo has leaned into more of the subtle comedy, the weariness of the role, but he's also benefited from putting Bruce with other characters that accept Bruce and the Hulk for who he is. So when you're around people like Tony and Steve and all the other characters, and they all love the Hulk and all appreciate him as part of the team, of course that's going to make Bruce a genuinely more positive human being. You get someone like Edward Norton's Bruce, where he has no allies, no backup of any kind, he's isolated himself, he's going to be more depressed and lonesome and down on himself. So very different personalities. That said, this is still chronologically part of the MCU, so this movie did happen. Mark Ruffalo's Bruce has referenced things very sort of, kind of, in the past that happened in The Incredible Hulk, but it's not held to with such a brick canon that all the other MCU films have. The only other character that's been pulled out of The Incredible Hulk so far, well, actually 2, apparently. The other one I have a bit of issue with, but I don't care. It's the same as taking a little kid from Iron Man 2 and going, that was Peter Parker. No, it wasn't, but if that's what you want to do, fine. General Ross, obviously, in The Incredible Hulk, is the only other character really that's recurred after this film besides Bruce, and he went from his military upbringing in The Incredible Hulk to being more of a sleazy politician from Captain America's Civil War onwards, and his relationship with Bruce and the Hulk has never been brought up ever again. He mentions him once where he says, where is the Hulk? But he doesn't pursue him with the passion that he pursues him in The Incredible Hulk. An Easter egg, the other character here is Martin Starr. He portrays a computer nerd who is bribed by Bruce with pizza. Very recently, Marvel has decided to say that because Martin Starr plays a science teacher, Mr. Harrington, in Spider-Man movies, Spider-Man Homecoming and Spider-Man Far From Home, they've decided that that was indeed a young Mr. Harrington in that film. That's fine. I'm okay with that. But don't say that that was the original plan for Martin Starr. Absolutely wasn't. Now, I'll get the negatives out of the way for this because I want to focus more on the positives here. The Incredible Hulk is a very standard 2000s Marvel type of film. It is character has powers, takes on another character who is evil, who has the exact same powers of him, the love interest, the comedic sidekicks, all of that's all in here, but it's all very run-of-the-mill stuff. And it's very similar to the Ang Lee Hulk's story plot as well, with General Ross and the army hunting the Hulk as doggedly as they can. It is indeed a very simple plot. In fact, some would say too simple, which leads into the other issue with The Incredible Hulk, is that there seems to be more of a movie here that we didn't get. For fun, if you ever want to go back and look at the original trailers for The Incredible Hulk, there are chunks of scenes and sets and plot points which are just not in the film at all. The most notorious trailer opens with Edward Norton's Bruce talking with Ty Burrell's Leonard Sampson, having a big old conversation about what it's like to be the Hulk. In the actual movie, Ty Burrell's Leonard Sampson is delegated to about 4 minutes of screen time, to a point where you don't meet him enough to understand his personality and the decisions that he makes to do the things that he does in the movie. I also learnt recently as well that Ty Burrell's character is also from the comics as a superhero type person. I wouldn't know that. To me, he's just Ty Burrell. He's the girlfriend's current boyfriend who's just in the way of Bruce and Betty being together. But there's barely even any of that. You never get a sense of him as a person. Edward Norton has notoriously gone on record and said that he had a completely different vision for the Incredible Hulk, but he had the different script that he worked and wrote on. He was very excited to take on this role, and then when it got into production, it was streamlined, cut, jiggered to turn into a usual Marvel film that had been coming out from that point. Especially while shooting it as well, the rumblings of a cinematic universe, the priority became less about making this independent indie film about the Hulk that Edward Norton wanted to make, and more a big summer blockbuster about the Hulk with the potential that maybe the Hulk can go play with the other Marvel superheroes at some point. So you can, if you know that when you're watching it, you can feel there are bits missing. There are chunks of story that aren't around. There's a layer to it that isn't there. Notoriously, when you get to the end of the film and the movie just sort of stops. The whole plot of the movie is that Bruce doesn't want to turn into the Hulk anymore, so he's working on a way to either control his anger, but more importantly, find a way to get rid of it, which eventually brings him back into the real world. He was hiding out in the jungles, now he's back in New York. He's hanging out with Betty. She's helping him try to find this doctor who supposedly has studied Bruce's blood and knows of a way to kill the Hulk. General Ross, Betty's father, who wants the Hulk for himself because he believes that the Hulk is the property of the military and it's the perfect weapon against their enemies. He absolutely wants the Hulk, not Bruce, the Hulk. So he goes out of his way to hunt him down. There's this one particular soldier that he hires, a mercenary called Emil Blonsky, who's notoriously good at being a soldier, but every time he goes up against the Hulk, he's completely stepped on and destroyed, to a point where, desperate to evenly match himself up, he wants to take the same serum that Bruce took to become his equal, which of course backfires horrendously, as we all knew it could, and he turns into this monster called the Abomination, which is a more horrifying, angry Hulk than the Hulk we've already got. For about the first hour and 35 minutes, it's just that journey to meeting the scientist that will make Bruce not be Hulk. When we get to that point, within 15 minutes, it turns into Hulk versus Abomination. Bruce has to decide he wants to be the Hulk again, and he is, even though he cured the Hulk, but we don't know how he got it back. He just sort of was able to still be the Hulk, and then he runs off, and then he goes, okay, and then the credits start rolling. It's whiplashy. If you were in a car accident, you would get whiplash. So that sort of thing, when you see that sudden jerk stop to the movie and to how everything is just sort of turned into streamlined Hulk versus Abomination, and you know that there was probably more going on here, there might have been a bigger picture, it does hamper your ability to enjoy the film. That said, these are nitpicks. Looking at The Incredible Hulk, it is a well-shot, well-acted, well-directed film. It is not terrible by any means. If you like the 2000s Marvel stuff, which people did, because people went and saw them, you cannot look at The Incredible Hulk and go, oh, it's bad. It is nowhere near down to the depths of the original Ghost Rider or Elektra or the maligned Ben Affleck Daredevil. It is a solid superhero film. What I really like about it is that it absolutely jumps to the point at the start of the movie. It gets the Hulk origin story out of the way completely, because we already saw it in Ang Lee's Hulk, and if you are familiar with Hulk, you know how he became the Hulk, or you don't really care that he's the Hulk. You just want to see him be the Hulk. So the credits fly through and you see Bruce turn into the Hulk for the first time, and you absolutely get the point straight away. Combined with a very powerful score, the music from The Incredible Hulk is one of my favorite MCU scores. It really highlights the hidden monstrosity of the Hulk inside Bruce Banner, and also the fugitive style storyline that's going, where he's constantly on the run from the people that are after him. I think Edward Norton plays Bruce Banner very well. He really highlights the polar opposites between Bruce and Hulk. His Bruce is scrawny and teeny tiny, and a normal person could step on him and he would break, which is an absolute contrast when he turns into the Hulk and he's this big lumbering behemoth that smashes through. Because as we've stepped forward with technology going forward, and we're trying really hard now to have the people motion capture their roles. So Mark Ruffalo gets the motion capture for Hulk in the same way Josh Brolin gets the motion capture Thanos. As a result of that, though it is neat to say that Mark Ruffalo plays both Bruce Banner and the Hulk, there's more correlation between the two. They don't feel like two distinctly different creatures, not like a Jekyll and Hyde sort of thing. You can see Mark Ruffalo's personality and humor and all that in both Bruce and the Hulk, which is still fine, but in terms of the story of Bruce and the Hulk being two completely different things, what we get from Edward Norton's portrayal here is probably more accurate, and I think very intriguing as well. The villains and the things that are going on, nothing's terrible. Tim Roth is great as Blonsky before he turns into the Abomination, when he's just this arrogant soldier boy who just is after the ultimate challenge, going after the Hulk and wants to step up the game. It's intriguing to see him use his brain to try and outwit the Hulk in certain situations. Before he throws it all in and tries just to be a monster, he comes up with ways to zigzag around him and these smart plans with his guns and the tranquilizers or whatever, which in some cases do befuddle the Hulk in a way. So that is interesting. William Holt is a great General Ross. We know that because he's been brought back to play him in future MCU films. His dogged pursuit of the Hulk and believing that what the Hulk is his property and his US governments and all of that. Very interesting. Betty Ross, Liv Tyler, she's fine. She's very standard romance person for this movie, such to a point where I can see why they haven't bothered to bring her back and have tried instead to push Bruce's romantic interest into other directions. And of course, as I said, Ty Burrell, he's hardly in it, so I can't even really talk about him. The other good/bad thing is Tim Blake Nelson plays the scientist that Bruce is looking for to help him cure the Hulk, Dr. Samuel Stearns. He plays him in this really unsettling way. So the moment you meet him, you know this guy is not good. You don't have to read the comics to know this guy, there's something off about him. I don't like him. Notoriously, his fate in the movie is left in a cliffhanger that has not been picked up unless apparently you read one specific comic that came out on one specific day in 2012. Otherwise, he hasn't been picked up yet. Maybe he will. I've heard talk that the upcoming She-Hulk Disney Plus show is going to bring back Blonsky as the Abomination, so maybe we will get to see Samuel Stearns back. Who knows? They're certainly acknowledging that this movie exists a lot more going forward, which is good, because before Civil War, this movie was there, but it also wasn't there. But aside from all that, it is fun. It is a fun superhero movie with some good stuff going on. If you don't stack it up against what the MCU has become, yeah, sure, it's going to pale in comparison. But it is an original idea, original concept, and it introduced the Hulk and the Hulk world to the MCU. It is not a gratuitous sequel that was made just because you need to, with a lack of a storyline or anything like that. It wasn't a movie that was simply made to introduce a character just so they could be an Avengers film that very same year without really bothering to introduce the character at all. There was effort here, effort put in to make a serious, entertaining, intriguing Hulk film. Edward Norton, he notoriously doesn't sign on for things unless he's interested in it. And obviously disillusioned with the production of here is why he hasn't proceeded as Bruce going on forward on. And I don't think he regrets the decision. I don't think Mark Ruffalo, I think, certainly doesn't regret his decision. But aside from that, if you can just look past the essence of the fact that there is a bigger concept here missing, I think it's a fine film. I think it's good. It doesn't deserve the reputation that it's got. Finally, before I sign off, we'll just talk about the MCU references in here because, of course, that's why we're talking about all these movies, really. There's certainly more in here than Iron Man, which is intriguing in that this movie wasn't made to be part of the MCU originally. Obviously, if you're familiar with MCU lore, the super soldier serum that Bruce experiments on and with the gamma radiation that eventually gives him the Hulk was originally the serum that was used in the comics to create Captain America. So the movie references that this serum was first created during World War II during the Nazis. So that has seamlessly fit in to where the MCU went. So that's pretty awesome that was there originally before even any plans for an MCU crossover. Aside from that, there are a few Flash and you'll miss it S.H.I.E.L.D. logos, Stark Industries, stuff that you could see was probably added in post-production. But of course, the most notorious thing is that at the end of this movie, Tony Stark shows up to talk to General Ross about the Avengers. That leads to a bit of a plot hole in that why Stark approached Ross about the Avengers Initiative. But at the time when this was made, it wasn't a plan. It wasn't, we know what is going to happen when Tony approaches Ross. It was just, Robert Downey Jr. is nearby on the set. He's shooting Iron Man. Can we get him over here for a day just to shoot this? We can. Brilliant. It was done in the same way that Samuel L. Jackson appeared as Nick Fury in Iron Man. It will be fun if we can do it. Can we do it? Oh, we've got the time? Okay, we'll do it. It'll be neat. People who have just gone to the cinemas a month ago and saw Iron Man, they probably will come and see this one because they like Marvel movies. Look, that's Tony. Oh, wow, cool. And it just feeds that interest. These two movies, Iron Man and The Incredible Hulk, both independent movies in their own right. If there had not been any MCU movies afterwards, these films still would exist fine. But essentially they were tests. They were testing the waters to see if they could work together and how people would react. And obviously people reacted positively. It worked well that people could say they were part of that, because there was no movies in 2009 while everybody went, okay, cool, stop a minute. This seems like this is possible. Maybe we can do this. We've got an Iron Man sequel coming. I believe we were going to start work on a Thor film and a Captain America film. Let's step back. Let's streamline this. Let's focus. Let's see what we can do. And then, of course, the rest is history, which I will, of course, be talking about when we get to that point. Overall, The Incredible Hulk, I think is great. I give it a solid 8 out of 10. Again, my rankings don't mean much. Don't listen to those specifically, but just understand that I think it's great. I enjoy The Incredible Hulk. I love to rewatch The Incredible Hulk. I think it's a nice middle tier MCU film. Certainly not at the top, certainly not at the bottom. It's interesting what it was. It's interesting to watch. It does not deserve the flack that it's got. If you have not seen it in a while, I would recommend a rewatch to see if it improves itself in your eyes or if it even falls short. Whatever the case, it's worth another go if you haven't seen it in 13, 14 years. How many years I said when this episode began. Well, there you are. Thank you very much for listening for another MCU update. Next week, I believe, unless I run out of time, but I hope not because I'm excited to do it, I'm doing another top 10 and I will be focusing on the top 10 movies for me from 2014, which is an extremely hard list to make. 2014 was full of top-notch movies. It was really hard to narrow down the top 10 and the honorable mentions, let alone the top 10. So tune in next week to check in for that. I think it's going to be fun. But until then, stay safe, everyone out there. I love you and appreciate you as always. You've been spliced in later. Adios, muchachos. I'll catch you next time.